The silent departure. On the day of her divorce, she left in silence. Pregnant. He thought it was over. Months later, an innocent question revealed a truth that changed his life forever. Now, he must confront the past and the child he never knew existed. Can love survive when everything comes to light too late? Interactive question. Leave a like, subscribe, and comment below. Do you believe in second chances? Stay with us until the end. This story will leave a mark on you. She held the pen as if it were burning her fingers. Across the table, Leo kept his eyes fixed on the paper, but he wasn't reading. He was just staring at his name, printed in small letters at the bottom of those pages that smelled of ink and misfortune. The notary's office was too silent, a soulless silence, like a public office where marriages die in a row, as if they were nothing more than paperwork. Outside, traffic continued with brutal indifference, horns blaring for lives that had nothing to do with theirs. "Ms. Herrera," the clerk called, her voice dry, as if repeating a name from a school list. She took a deep breath, as if the world's oxygen had run out right there, and she signed. The pen slid with a firm hand, but inside, something trembled, something that had no name. Perhaps the weight of unsaid words, of the sleepless nights he never saw, or of the love that dissolved among tasks, deadlines, and silent arguments. Leo took the pen right after. No drama. Without looking at her. He just signed. And there they were. Done. Casually and sadly. Two strangers with a shared past, and a future separated by a glass door and the metallic sound of an official stamp. "Everything is in order," the clerk said, handing back the documents. Sophia got up before him. Her eyes scanned Leo as if looking for something, a sign maybe, a hint of regret. But he remained impassive, his jaw clenched, his shoulders too tense for someone who had supposedly closed a chapter. She didn't say a word, neither did he. And so they said goodbye, with silence. On the sidewalk outside the courthouse, the morning sun hurt her eyes. Sophia pulled her coat tighter, not because of the cold, but for defense. There was something in her that felt on the verge of breaking, and the wind, though slight, already felt like too much of a threat. She walked past the bus stop, the kiosk where they used to buy coffee on Sundays, the flower shop he hated, where she bought the violets he always forgot to water. She walked without any apparent destination, but she knew exactly where she was going. The apartment building was gray on the outside and silent on the inside. On the 7th floor, apartment 703 was the same as always. Clean, tidy, and cold. Every corner was a compressed memory, as if the walls had a memory of their own and hid it just to hurt you when you least expect it. Sophia didn't pack suitcases. She took a backpack, 2 changes of clothes, a comfortable pair of sneakers. The rest didn't matter. In the bathroom mirror, she saw a tired version of herself. The eyes that once smiled with love now avoided any reflection that might hurt. She tied her hair in a loose bun. She took a deep breath one more time. She opened the last drawer of the dresser. She took out a photo of her parents, the only one left. A faded portrait of the 3 of them in the garden, before the accident, before the death, before everything. Then she looked toward the front door, and without looking back, she left. The bus terminal was small, but crowded. People coming and going with stories no one ever told. Sophia bought the ticket without hesitation. One way. To a forgotten town on the map, where time moved slower and sorrows maybe weighed less. She sat on a bench on the platform, her gaze fixed on the floor. She wasn't crying. She had already cried too much. But she wasn't smiling either. It was as if something was in suspension inside her. a contained sigh, a faded memory. She thought about Leo, of course. It was impossible to avoid. She thought about how the arguments grew. Not with shouting. That would have been easier. It was with silences. Silences that accumulated like dust under the bed, and one day suffocated you. She thought about the days she tried to talk, about the notes on the fridge, about the dinner he didn't notice, about the hug she rejected, about the lost glances between cell phones and spreadsheets. Love didn't die suddenly. It died little by little, and no one did anything about it. The bus arrived with a hydraulic sigh that seemed final. Sophia got on. She chose a window seat. And, for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel fear. But not because she was leaving. The fear was something else. A fear she hid deep inside. Her hand instinctively went to her flat, discreet belly. She closed her eyes. No one knew. Not even Leo. And she wouldn't tell him. Not for revenge. Not for pride. But out of sheer exhaustion. Because the last time she tried to be heard, she ended up screaming alone in a room where he didn't even take off his headphones. Because she needed to start over. And sometimes, to start over, you have to leave before someone asks you to stay. Hours later, the bus was driving down forgotten roads, with sleepy farms on both sides and an endless sky on the horizon. Urban life was starting to disappear in the rearview mirror, and with it, everything Sophia couldn't save. At the end of the journey, Ms. Elena was waiting for her. The grandmother with rough hands and deep eyes. The woman who raised her with silence and wisdom. The one who didn't ask questions but understood everything with a single look. Sophia needed that, embracing silence, firm ground, space to exist without having to explain herself. The bus continued down the road, and Leo's name was trapped between her teeth, like a question that would never be asked, like an ending that still hurt more than she let on. But she didn't look back. Not yet. She still couldn't sleep well. In the new, smaller bed, the mattress made a hollow sound every time she moved. The sheets smelled of bar soap and a faint scent of lavender that Ms. Elena put in the closets. Everything was simple, clean, distant, and, at the same time, filled with a silence that didn't suffocate. It just said, "You can stop fighting now." Sophia woke up early. Not out of habit, but because her thoughts wouldn't give her a break. She would wake up even before the sun, when the sky was still an undecided gray, and she would lie there, looking at the wooden ceiling, where the marks of time told their own stories. Sometimes she felt nauseous, other times, just a pressure in her chest that she couldn't explain. Ms. Elena didn't ask questions. She would make strained coffee, fry bread on the griddle, heat milk, and leave everything on the table with a silence that said, "Here is everything, just as you need it." "Did you sleep well?" she would ask sometimes in a low voice, almost respecting her granddaughter's broken pieces. Sophia would answer with a nod. Yes, or more or less. She never said no. She didn't want to worry her, nor did she want to open the doors she kept locked inside. Outside, the day was born with a painful calm. Roosters crowing, leaves dancing in the wind, the sound of Ms. Elena's hoe turning the soil. It was as if the world there followed a rhythm that didn't demand a rush, the exact opposite of the life Sophia had led just a few weeks ago, where hours slipped through her fingers and her heart lived in a state of constant waiting. Waiting for something she no longer remembered what it was. Now, there was space. Space to breathe. Space to feel her body changing. Slowly, in silence. The body was starting to become a refuge. She felt it. A little more every day. It was still too early for others to notice, but she already knew. Her body spoke with small signs. The metallic taste in her mouth, the tiredness that came from nowhere, the way emotions hit her differently. A silly scene on TV was enough to make her cry. Any memory could unbalance her. Leo was still a shadow, present only in the past tense of memory. She didn't talk about him, not even to herself. She kept everything in a mental corner, like a closed drawer whose contents could spill out if it was suddenly opened. Ms. Elena's house was modest. Polished concrete floors, antique furniture, walls covered with black and white portraits of people whose names Sophia barely remembered. The land was small, but enough. A few chickens, a corral with 2 cows, a vegetable garden in the back, and a porch with 2 rocking chairs that creaked every time the wind passed by. There, the routine was different, more physical, closer to the earth. Sophia, little by little, began to allow herself. She started by helping her grandmother with the dishes. Then, she watered the garden. One day, she picked tomatoes. Another, she planted cilantro. The silence between them was a companion, a complicity without words, built over the years since Ms. Elena took her in after "The earth heals, child," she said one day as they were cleaning beans together. Sophia didn't answer, but she nodded inside. There was something therapeutic about washing leaves carefully, hearing the snap of dry pods, getting her hands dirty with mud without guilt. It was as if her body had found a new language, one that didn't depend on promises, explanations, or goodbyes. One ordinary afternoon, as she brushed her hair in the shade of the mango tree, Sophia felt a slight tickle in her belly. It wasn't pain, it wasn't nausea, it was a presence. She put her hand on her flat belly, and she stayed like that for a while, in silence. There, alone, without witnesses, she whispered, "I'm here, for you, even if I'm a little broken." She didn't know if she was ready to be a mother, but she knew she couldn't stand to be invisible anymore. The days passed like that, between simple tasks and heavy thoughts. Sophia tried not to think about how Leo would react if he knew. She was afraid, but not of him, afraid of starting a cycle that had consumed her all over again, afraid of getting lost again in the expectations of someone who no longer saw her. They didn't fight much, and maybe that was the worst part, because the opposite of love was never hate. It was indifference. It was the silent dinners, the conversations that ended with, "We'll see later," the glances that no longer met. Leo was always a fair man, but emotionally absent, a methodical programmer, addicted to routines and algorithms, and terrible at interpreting feelings. Sophia screamed without a voice, and he didn't listen. Now, there was nothing left to scream about. And maybe that was a relief. One morning, while hanging clothes on the line, she felt a sharp pain in her back, a dry pull that made her fingers clench the still wet sheet. It wasn't serious, but her body was starting to say that the secret's days were numbered. Ms. Elena noticed. She didn't ask, but she brought a small stool, insisted that she sit down, and gave her chamomile tea. Sophia held the cup with both hands. "You know, don't you?" she murmured, her eyes downcast. "I always knew," the grandmother replied, with the calm of someone who has time on their side. "I thought I could hide it, I don't know. I was tired." Ms. Elena stroked her hair, just like she did when she was a child, and woke up from a nightmare. "You don't need to hide anything here, Sophia. What you carry is a blessing, not a shame," she cried. For the first time since she arrived. Not like someone who collapses, but like someone who is finally letting go of the weight. And in that contained crying, there was a release. In the following days, she started writing in a notebook. Not a diary, just loose notes, words that came to her, phrases without an owner, thoughts that no longer fit inside her. If he asks, what do I say? What if I regret leaving? What will my child think of me? Is he still my child, or is he ours? She didn't have answers, but now she had questions, and that was more than she had before. Her belly began to show a slight bump around the 3rd month. Subtle, but there. Real. Sophia began to walk more slowly, to breathe more deeply. The neighbors in the countryside began to notice, and like in any small town, the questions came. Carefully, with curiosity, with judgments in disguise. And the father? They would ask. Sophia would just smile, a short smile, and she would reply, "He's not here." And it was true, in every sense. One night, as the cicadas sang in the bushes and the moon hid behind heavy clouds, Ms. Elena said something that resonated for days. Sometimes, you have to leave to be able to come back whole. Sophia didn't answer. She just looked at her belly, and she understood. She still didn't know if she would ever go back. But for the first time, she felt that she was beginning to find herself. Interactive question. What do you think will happen when Leo discovers the truth? Do you think he will accept his child, or will he run away from this new reality? Share your thoughts in the comments. He walked into the clinic by chance. He needed a routine checkup, something quick. He wasn't sleeping well. He had headaches, and his stomach was churning like a sea on a stormy day. A random doctor, a clinic near the city center. And there she was. Camilla, a mutual friend, closer to Sophia than to him, but still part of a shared past. She smiled when she saw him, a slight smile, without malice, but full of memories. "Leo? Wow, what a small world," she said, her eyes shining with surprise. "Everything okay?" Yes, just here for some tests. I've been a little..." He hesitated, too tired to make up a lie. "Overwhelmed." Camilla nodded, checking some papers on the counter. "I can imagine. Well, Sophia's pregnancy must be a handful for you too, right?" The sentence was said as if she were commenting on the weather. Simple, casual. But for Leo, it landed like a bomb. "What?" Camilla stopped. She realized too late what she had just said. You didn't know." Leo stood still for a second, his body rigid, his heart pounding. "She's pregnant?" Camilla's eyes widened. "I thought I'm so sorry, Leo. She came in for a consultation once, you know. I said something to her. I thought you already knew." But he didn't answer. He walked out of the clinic as if fleeing a fire, without saying goodbye, without picking up his papers. He got into his car, and he just sat there. The world around him became blurry, as if everything had been pushed away, and all that was left was the dull sound of his own blood pounding in his temples. Pregnant, at the time of the divorce. And she never said a thing. Driving was automatics. His hands on the steering wheel, his eyes on the road, his mind in a spiral. He took the highway without looking at the GPS, as if his body knew where to go. And in a way, it did. Every kilometer increased the pressure in his chest. Fear? Guilt? Betrayal? She hid this from me. She took my child away. She lied to me. But deep down, in that place where wounds burn without bleeding, he knew he had been blind. For a long time. The road to the countryside seemed longer than it was. The sky was already beginning to change color when he entered the small town. He didn't have to ask for directions. He remembered the farm. The grandmother. He knew where to go. The wooden gate creaked. The chickens scattered when he stepped into the yard. And then he saw her. Sophia was facing away, hanging clothes on the line, her belly already visible under the loose dress, a discreet bump, but impossible to ignore. He froze. Time stood still between them for an instant, and then she turned around. Their eyes met. Sophia didn't gasp in surprise. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She just looked at him, firmly, in silence. "What are you doing here?" she asked, without raising her voice. He walked closer. Firm steps, a hard expression. "Are you pregnant?" "Yes." The answer came without preamble, raw, and loaded with a silent pain. Leo ran a hand over his face. He took a deep breath. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "I did," she said, without hesitating. "But I didn't." Rage exploded in him. "What do you mean you didn't, Sophia? How could you think that's okay? We signed the divorce papers, and you were already pregnant." "Yes, Leo, I already was, and you didn't even notice." The sentence cut through the air like a knife. He took a step back, more from pain than surprise. "You left me," he said, his voice cracking, "and you took my child away." "I left because I had been leaving for a long time," she retorted, her eyes glistening. "You were the only one who didn't see it." He tried to answer, but the words got stuck in his throat. "Do you think this is easy for me?" she continued. "Do you think I woke up one day and thought, I'm going to disappear with his child? No, I was tired. I was destroyed, Leo." He sat down on the wooden bench on the porch, his head in his hands. "You could have told me, and what would you have done? I would have been there. Would you?" Silence. She sat on the other end of the bench, leaving a space between them. She looked at her hands. She looked at her belly. "I tried to tell you," she confessed in a lower voice. "The week of the divorce, I tried. But you were so distant, so automatic. You signed those papers as if they were just another report. I couldn't." Leo closed his eyes. He remembered that day. He remembered not looking at her even once. "I don't hate you, Leo. I didn't hide it for revenge. I just wanted to protect the only part of me that wasn't already hurt." He looked at her, for the first time, truly, and he saw the exhaustion, the sadness, the strength. "Do you hate me?" he asked, with difficulty. She shook her head. "No, but I don't trust you anymore." That hurt more than any accusation. He stood up. He walked to the fence, his gaze lost on the fields. "Do you have any idea what it's like to find out like this? By surprise, from a friend, as if I were anyone." "And you?" she responded, getting up too. "Do you have any idea what it's like to sleep next to someone who no longer sees you? Who doesn't ask if you're okay? Who only notices that something has changed when it's already too late?" The words hung in the air, too heavy to be taken back. "I came here because I needed to look you in the eyes," he said, turning to her. "I needed to see if this was real. If it was really you? Pregnant? Alone?" She crossed her arms, instinctively protecting her belly. "Now you've seen it. So what?" Leo didn't know what to say, because he believed his presence was enough, that the shock justified his actions, that the pain gave him a right. But none of that healed what she had felt, alone, night after night. "I don't want to fight," she said. Calmer now. "I just want peace. For my child, for me, our child." She hesitated for a moment. "I need to think," she murmured, walking slowly back to the house. Leo stayed there, in the yard. The sky was already dark, the stars beginning to show themselves, the smell of the countryside, the sound of crickets, and the bitter taste of guilt. He got into his car. He turned on the engine, but he didn't leave. The dark road ahead looked easy. All he had to do was accelerate, disappear. But the silence inside the car was deafening. More than the rage, more than the disappointment, more than the pain. It was the weight of not having listened before, of only seeing when it was already too late. And there, in the darkness, with his hands on the steering wheel and his heart in pieces, Leo finally understood. Sophia didn't hate him. She was just exhausted from waiting for a man who never saw what she was carrying, both inside and out. Interactive question. Do you think Sophia will let Leo stay? What do you think he needs to do to rebuild her trust? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Leo didn't go home that night. He drove aimlessly through the countryside roads, his headlights cutting through the darkness that seemed as vast as the emptiness in his chest. He stopped at a cheap inn in a neighboring town, but he didn't sleep. He lay on his side, his eyes open, staring at the stained ceiling as if he could find answers there. He didn't have any. All he saw, with cruel clarity, was what he hadn't seen. The woman who slept beside him for years, and who, little by little, disappeared inside herself. The pregnancy that grew in silence, ignored by his absence disguised as routine. Sophia's face wouldn't leave his mind, not the one from their reunion, but that old look, from the days when she still smiled with her eyes. He tried to remember when was the last time he saw that. He couldn't. The next morning, still unable to organize his thoughts, he got back in the car. This time, not like someone barging in, but like someone returning, not by right, but out of necessity. He arrived at the farm in the late morning. The sun was high. The heat was thick. Ms. Elena was in the yard, washing rags in a large aluminum bucket. She looked up calmly when she saw him. "You came back?" she asked, as if commenting on the change in weather. Leo stopped in front of her. He had no prepared words, no arguments. He just had a tight chest and empty hands. He tried to say, but failed. Ms. Elena didn't expect explanations. She hit the rag against the side of the bucket and said, "Come in. Sophia's inside. But go easy. She's bleeding inside, you know? And someone who's bleeding inside doesn't scream. They just lock themselves up." Leo nodded, swallowing hard. He went up the porch steps slowly. His heart felt heavy. The door was ajar. He knocked softly, twice. Sophia appeared in the hallway, a towel in her hands. She had just come out of the bathroom. Her hair, still damp, was clinging to her neck. There was no surprise in her gaze, just a contained tension. "You came back?" "I came back." She took a step back, gesturing for him to come in. She didn't say anything else. He entered like someone stepping on unknown ground, although, in a way, he once had the keys to that place. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, standing in the living room, avoiding looking her in the eyes. "Can you?" Sophia sat down in a chair. He remained standing. The silence between them was no longer the same as at the courthouse. Now it had weight, but also expectation. "I've been thinking. A lot," he began, his voice low, almost doubtful. "And I know I have no right to demand anything from you, but I wanted to try, to talk, to understand." She looked up. This time, there was something different there. A thinner wall, maybe. "Did you come here to ask for forgiveness?" "No, not today. I came to ask for the truth." Sophia leaned back in the chair, hugging her belly, still without saying anything. "Yesterday I saw your face," he continued, "and I realized that I never truly looked at you when you needed me the most." She bit her lip. She looked down. Her silence wasn't resistance, it was defense, an alarm that went off every time someone got too close. "You abandoned me in silence, Leo," she finally said. "And now you want to talk about the truth? I didn't know how lonely you were. You didn't want to know." The correction was dry, but honest. He nodded. He wasn't going to argue. "I didn't come to fix anything. I just want to be here, to know if I still can." She took a deep breath. She looked at him, evaluating. Sophia's eyes not only held exhaustion but layers, as if, behind the pain, there was a minefield of memories and unasked questions. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said, her voice cracking. "You didn't see my body changing, my gaze changing, The only thing you saw was yourself. Leo took a step. Just one. He kept his distance. I was a coward. I hid behind work, routine, my silences. You tried so many times, and I pretended not to see because it was easier. I carried the end of our marriage alone, and now I carry another life too. He breathed deeply, the weight of those words piercing his chest like a knife. Let me, at least, share that weight now. The door creaked behind them. Ms. Elena entered with a rag on her shoulder. She didn't say anything right away. She went to the stove, put the teapot on the fire, and stirred the jars of herbs like someone observing a storm, about to change direction from a distance. That baby also deserves a present, Father, she murmured, without turning her face. Your story changed, but it's still being written. The whistling of the teapot growing on the fire seemed to echo what had not yet been said. Sophia didn't answer, but something in her face softened, just a little, like a slow thaw after winter. All right, she finally said. You can stay for now. Leo nodded. He wanted to smile, but he didn't dare. Thank you. She got up slowly. Her belly was more prominent than the last time he saw her. That was real. Human. A life growing there, and he wasn't a part of it until that moment. But no promises, she said firmly. I'm not ready for words. I just want actions. Their eyes met for a second longer than normal. There was a risk there, but also a try. As if, among the rubble, there was still room for something that was not just pain. In the following days, Leo didn't invade. He stayed close but discreet. He slept in a simple guest house in town and spent his afternoons helping Ms. Elena with whatever he could. He cleaned the chicken coop, repaired the gate, and dug the hard ground next to the vegetable garden. He sweated in silence, as if every drop was washing away a little of the guilt he carried. Sophia watched. She didn't say much, but she saw. She saw the effort. She saw the attempt. One afternoon, he appeared on the porch with 2 glasses of boxed juice. He held one out to her. He accepted it. My grandmother doesn't say anything, but she's testing you with all this work, she said, with a slight smile at the corner of her lips. I noticed, he replied without irony. It seems fair to me. The silence between them was no longer an abyss. It was a pause, a breath in a score that was starting, timidly, to be rewritten. Later, they sat under the mango tree. Sophia's belly pressed against the fabric of her dress. Leo observed the details of the place, the worn wood of the fence, the slight sway of the leaves, the smell of damp earth. Have you thought of any names? He asked, without looking at her directly. Yes, but I'm still deciding. Can I suggest one? She hesitated. Not yet. One step at a time. He nodded, without a rush. And there, under a sky that was beginning to turn golden, they sat together. Without plans, without guarantees. Just 2 survivors of a broken love, trying, for the first time in a long time, to speak without defenses. It wasn't a reconciliation. Not yet. But it was something Leo had never truly offered before. The next week, Leo showed up at the gate with a black folder under his arm and a sweaty brow. He smelled faintly of the road and had a good kind of tired in his eyes, the kind that comes from doing something that finally makes sense. I managed to rent a house nearby, he announced, holding the gate with one hand. It's about a 6-minute walk. It's simple, but it has a porch, 2 bedrooms, and a hammock in the living room. The owner gave me a good price. Sophia nodded. She didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed a little. Like someone hearing that, finally, her body would be able to rest. Leo wasn't there to impress. He was there to stay. In the days that followed, he didn't ask for space. He occupied it little by little. He brought fresh bread from the town bakery, fixed the faucet in Ms. Elena's laundry room without being asked, and started accompanying Sophia to prenatal appointments. At first, it was strange. She didn't know what ground she was on. There was a part of her that wanted to push him away, out of instinct, out of self-preservation. But another part, a quieter and more exhausted one, simply allowed him to be there. Not for her, for the baby. In the first appointment he accompanied her to, Leo sat on a stool next to the bed. His hands were clasped together. The doctor smiled, noticing the tension on his face. "First child?" she asked kindly. He nodded, his throat tight. Sophia was lying down, the cold gel on her belly, the transducer sliding slowly. And then, the sound. A hurried thump-thump, like footsteps running on a wooden bridge. The baby's heartbeat. Leo froze. That sound pierced through all the silences he had built inside him over the years. It was real, tangible. It existed, and it no longer fit just inside Sophia. She looked at him from the side, noticing the discreet sparkle in his eyes. "It sounds so fast," she said, in a softer voice than she intended. "It sounds like it's running from something," he replied, and then he smiled. It was the first smile between them that had no shadow. As the days went by, their routines intertwined. Leo worked in the mornings, programming between feedings and sporadic cries. In the afternoons, he would take turns with Sophia caring for Matthias. In the evenings, sometimes they would have dinner together. Other times, each in their own space, but always within the same place, like people who divide the world into two neighboring rooms and a shared tenderness. Ms. Elena watched everything with the wisdom of someone who has already seen many seasons pass. "You don't say what you are," she commented one night while cutting vegetables with Sophia in the kitchen, "but that doesn't change what you feel." Sophia smiled without looking up from the knife. "We don't know what we are yet. You don't have to know. Just don't let it pass without living it." She thought about that, thinking that maybe, at last, she was living something that didn't need to be defined to have value. One rainy night, Matthias took a long time to fall asleep. He was uncomfortable, with colic. Leo held him in his arms for almost an hour, walking back and forth through the living room, muttering made-up words and humming a tuneless melody that mixed a local folk song with something that sounded like an improvised lullaby. Sophia watched him from the doorway, leaning against the frame. Her gaze was full, with affection, with fear, with everything she had had to swallow in silence for so long. When he noticed her watching, he smiled. "He forgave me. He fell asleep." She laughed, despite the tiredness. "You have a talent. I just needed time and a good teacher. And who would that be?" "You." She didn't answer. She just walked to him, slowly, and for the first time since everything began, she rested her head on his shoulder. He didn't move. He just took a deep breath, and he continued to rock both of them, son and woman, at the same slow, steady rhythm. They weren't officially together, but they were, more than they had ever been. Matthias was already walking, stumbling, with his little arms up high, like someone conquering a new world with every step. His tiny feet were firm with the daring of those who don't yet know what it's like to fall, or no longer fear it. It was a golden afternoon, and the light filtered through the leaves of the mango tree, dappling the yard with shadow and light. On the clothesline, the colored flags that Sophia had cut by hand in the previous days were fluttering. A simple cake rested on the wooden table, next to a plate of savories and passion fruit juice. Matthias's first birthday had no theme. It had truth. "Want me to light the candles?" Leo asked, a lighter in his hand. Sophia looked at her son, who was playing on the floor with two empty boxes as if they were castles. She nodded. "Can you light them?" The flames flickered against the soft afternoon breeze. There were two candles, a number 1 and a small star next to it, chosen by her, because no one arrives in this world alone. Ms. Elena watched from the porch, sitting in her wicker chair, fanning her face with an old fan. Her eyes were moist, but she didn't say anything. She had already said enough in silence over the last year. Leo took Matthias in his arms and lifted him carefully. Sophia stood by his side. They didn't pose for a photo. They didn't set up a scene. They were just there, together, in front of that cake, with uneven frosting and real love. As they blew out the candle, their eyes met over the boy's head. And there, without words, without grand gestures, something between them finally gave way. The kiss didn't come in a hurry. It wasn't born of an impulse, but of an accumulation. Of all the times he stayed when he could have left. Of every early morning when she cried from exhaustion and he stayed by her side in silence, just to hold her hand. Of all the silences that, over time, became a refuge. It was a warm, lingering kiss, a reunion without a bang. And when they separated, Matthias smiled. Sophia ran her hand through her son's hair and then through Leo's. "We made it here, didn't we?" He looked at her with the tenderness that didn't ask for permission. "And I want to keep going with you." 6 months later, on a clear morning with a soft breeze, they walked to the highest part of the land, where the shadow of the tree stretched generously over the lawn. They brought a checkered blanket, 3 glasses, a carrot cake made by Ms. Elena, and a pair of wedding rings kept in a small wooden box that smelled of rosemary. There was no photographer, no guests, no decorations. Sophia wore a white cotton dress, her hair loose. Leo, a light shirt and jeans. Matthias ran between them, laughing at everything, his shirt twisted and his feet dirty with earth. Ms. Elena got up with Leo's help and walked toward them. She took the small box, opened it carefully, and held it out in front of them. "If you are sure about this, put on the ring and stay. Just that." They smiled. Leo took the smaller ring and, with trembling hands, placed it on Sophia's finger. "It's not out of obligation or for the past. It's for everything I want to build with you now." She took a deep breath. She took the other ring and put it on his finger firmly. "And I accept. Because you see me. Because now you stay, even when everything gets difficult." Matthias clapped, not understanding, but feeling that something beautiful was happening. Then he threw himself onto the blanket, putting his hands in the frosting before anyone could stop him. Everyone laughed. The wind blew softly, as if the world outside had stopped for a second to listen to that quiet, "I do," without a ceremony, but full of truth. Life after that didn't become a fairy tale. There were still sleepless nights, arguments about the shopping list, accumulated tiredness, and days when love wasn't pretty, but it was stubborn. But now there were roots. Leo's house became the house of all 3. The old photos were still stored away, but next to them, new pictures filled the frames. Matthias, with his face full of ice cream, Sophia dozing with him in her arms, Leo teaching the boy to plant a bean in a yogurt cup. They no longer talked about promises. They talked about turns, about agreements, about rest. There were days when Sophia still woke up with fear stuck in her throat. That old voice that said everything was going to end, that he would get tired, that she would lose everything again. But then she would feel his arm around her waist, or hear Leo talking to Matthias on the baby monitor, making up absurd stories about dragons who ate diapers. And the fear would retreat. Ms. Elena, now slower in her step, would say that time was the only reliable advisor. "Time shows who plants only to harvest, and who plants knowing that not everything bears fruit," she would say, as she picked herbs from the garden. Sophia planted, and even without guarantees, she flourished. One night, sitting on the porch, Leo held a cup of tea and looked at the yard lit by the dim moonlight. Matthias was asleep. The house was silent. Sophia was next to him, her legs tucked up in the chair. "If someone had told me 2 years ago that I would be here," he began, almost laughing, "I wouldn't have believed it," she finished. "But it's a good thing no one did. We had to get here on our own." She extended her arm and touched his hand. Their fingers intertwined. "We didn't go back to what we were." "No," he nodded. "We built something different." And there they were, without fanfare, without ceremony, but married, complete, and finally, together. By choice. For love. For everything that resisted time, and, though wounded, decided to stay. Sometimes, love doesn't die. It just waits in silence for the right moment to be rebuilt.